History tends to highlight kings, wars, and inventions, the big, defining moments. But hidden beneath all that are stories that feel more like fiction than fact. Strange events, creepy details, entire communities doing things no one could explain. These aren't myths or campfire tales. Every event in this list actually happened. Recorded in documents, letters, newspapers, and first-hand accounts. Yet most people have never heard of them. Some are disturbing because of what people believed. Others are unsettling because no one still knows what really happened. But all of them reveal just how bizarre and unfiltered the past truly was. This countdown isn't about textbook history. It's about the stories that slipped through the cracks, because they were too strange to make sense of. Let's start with one that turned an entire city into a deadly dance floor. In the summer of 1518, a woman named Frau Trophäa walked into the streets of Strasbourg and started dancing. She didn't stop. She kept going for hours, then into the night, then into the next day. Within a week, dozens of people had joined her, all dancing, non-stop, without music, unable to rest. Over time, the number grew to more than 400. Some collapsed from exhaustion. A few reportedly died. City leaders were baffled. Their solution? Build a stage and bring in musicians, hoping to let the dancers burn it out. But it only made things worse. The cause remains unknown. Some believe it was mass hysteria. Others blame contaminated grain with a hallucinogenic mold. But none of it has ever been proven. It's one of the strangest recorded events in medical history. And no one's sure why it ever started. The next case wasn't about dancing, it was laughter. And once it began, it didn't stop. In 1962, at a girls' boarding school in the village of Kashasha, Tanganyika, now part of Tanzania, something strange happened. 3 students began laughing uncontrollably. It didn't stop, and within hours others had joined in. At first, teachers thought it was a prank. But within days, nearly 100 students were affected. The laughter wasn't cheerful, it was exhausting. Some cried while laughing. Some couldn't sleep. Others collapsed from pure fatigue. The school eventually shut down. But the laughter kept spreading to nearby villages, then to other schools. Hundreds were affected. There were no signs of illness, no known trigger, just a wave of laughter that refused to end. Doctors called it a case of mass psychogenic illness, where stress spreads like a virus. But there's still no clear explanation for how it grew so fast or lasted so long. The next case wasn't contagious, but what it left behind was far more terrifying. In August 1915, during World War I, German forces launched a brutal chlorine gas attack on Russia's Oswiec fortress. The goal was simple: wipe out the defenders and take control. After the gas cleared, German troops advanced, expecting to meet no resistance. But what they saw instead made them retreat. Out of the green mist, Russian soldiers emerged, coughing up blood. Their faces burned, uniforms soaked with chemicals. Many could barely stand, but they still charged. The Germans panicked. They fled, convinced they were being attacked by the dead. This moment became known as the Attack of the Dead Men. The Russian soldiers weren't supernatural, just barely alive, fighting through the effects of poison gas with what strength they had left. It wasn't a legend. It was a recorded moment in military history, one that didn't feel real to those who witnessed it. The next story takes us from war zones to workplaces, where glowing paint turned deadly. In the early 1900s, radium was considered a wonder element. It was added to drinks, lotions, and even paint. At the U.S. Radium Corporation, young women were hired to paint glowing numbers on watch dials using radium-based paint. They were told it was completely safe. To keep the brushes sharp, they were instructed to lick the tips. Over time, many of the workers began to fall ill. Teeth fell out. Their jaws weakened and broke. Some women's bones literally began to decay, and their mouths glowed in the dark. Doctors struggled to explain what was happening. The company denied any responsibility. But the truth eventually surfaced. The women were being poisoned by radiation. Known as the Radium Girls, Their legal battle helped shape workplace safety laws for years to come. The next case also involved death, but this time, the danger came from those already buried. In the late 1800s, tuberculosis was spreading through rural New England. People didn't know what caused it. One by one, family members would grow pale, thin, and weak, coughing blood until they died. With no answers from doctors, some turned to older beliefs. They thought the dead were somehow draining life from the living. In places like Rhode Island and Vermont, families began digging up their relatives. If a body looked unusually intact, they removed and burned the heart. Sometimes, the ashes were mixed into a drink and given to the sick, a desperate attempt to stop the disease. These weren't acts of cruelty, they were acts of fear. People were trying to protect their families with the only tools they had. Today, we know it was tuberculosis, not vampires. But the panic left a strange and lasting mark on American folklore. Next is the story of a man who ate anything, and maybe even someone. In 18th century France, a man named Tarare became known for one thing: his endless hunger. He could eat non-stop, consuming meals meant for 15 people in one sitting. He ate corks, live animals, garbage, and once, a whole eel without chewing. Doctors were baffled. His body was thin, almost frail, but his appetite seemed impossible. He was admitted to a hospital for study, where his condition worsened. He would sneak into rooms to eat leftover food, and once was caught drinking the blood of other patients. Then a child went missing from the hospital. Tarare was immediately suspected, but there was no proof. He was expelled and disappeared into poverty. Years later, during an autopsy, his stomach was found stretched and rotting, the cause of his suffering still unclear. He was never diagnosed, only remembered. The next event wasn't about hunger, but about a military that tried to fight birds and lost. In 1932, Australia faced an unexpected problem: emus. After World War I, veterans were given farmland in Western Australia, but the land was dry and hard to maintain. Then came the birds. Over 20,000 emus began migrating through the farmland, knocking down fences and destroying crops. Farmers asked the government for help. The military responded by sending soldiers with machine guns. The plan didn't work. The emus were fast, scattered easily, and ran in unpredictable patterns. The soldiers wasted thousands of rounds and barely made a dent. The birds outran trucks, dodged bullets, and disappeared into the scrubland. After several failed attempts, the mission was called off. The emus had effectively won. It became known, half seriously, half jokingly, as the Great Emu War. The next story goes further back in time, involving a mysterious symbol cut into a field and blamed on the devil. In 1678, a pamphlet circulated in Hertfordshire, England, telling the story of a farmer who refused to pay a worker to mow his oat field. According to the tale, the man angrily said he'd rather have the devil do it instead. That night, the field was cut perfectly, and in a pattern no one could explain. Locals claimed it had been mowed by fire, not tools. The anonymous pamphlet included a woodcut, illustration, a devil-like figure carving a pattern into the crops. It was labeled the Mowing Devil. Soon it became one of the earliest known stories, involving strange shapes in fields, what some today would call crop circles. Whether the story was meant as satire, warning, or truth isn't known. But the image and phrase stuck around. The next event wasn't just about symbols. It involved a full-blown mass of people, caught in a dangerous race. At the 1904 Olympics in St. Louis, the marathon event quickly turned into chaos. The course was dusty, unpaved, and stretched over rough terrain in the midday heat. Only one water station was available at mile 11 in a 24-mile race. Runners collapsed from dehydration. One participant, a Cuban mailman named Felix Carvajal, paused mid-race to snack on apples from an orchard, which turned out to be rotten. He got sick and lay down for a nap. Another runner was chased off course by stray dogs. The man who crossed the finish line first had actually hitched a ride in a car for part of the race. He was later disqualified. The official winner, Thomas Hicks, was given a mixture of raw egg, brandy, and strychnine, a form of rat poison, by his trainers during the race. He crossed the finish line barely conscious. The final story on this list doesn't involve athletes or coaches, just students, suspicion, and a series of unexplained deaths. In the 1660s, at Sweden's Uppsala University, students and professors began falling ill. Some died. The symptoms were strange: sudden dizziness, confusion, violent illness. Rumors of poisons spread quickly. The university was a center of learning, but also of political tension and personal rivalries. Accusations followed. Some believed a student was behind it. Others suspected a professor with connections to dark practices. There were even whispers of witchcraft. No one was ever charged. The deaths stopped as suddenly as they began, but the fear lingered. Records from the time are limited, but the incident was real enough to make it into historical archives. What caused the poisonings? Was it deliberate? An accident? Or something entirely unknown? Centuries later, the case remains unsolved. A quiet footnote in history, full of questions no one ever answered. History is full of events that don't quite fit, stories that feel too strange to be real, yet are backed by records, witnesses, and facts. These 10 moments may not be well known, but each one reveals something deeper, that the past wasn't always logical, orderly, or easy to explain. If anything, these stories remind us how much we still don't know, not just about science or medicine, but about human behavior, fear, belief, and the way people once made sense of the world around them. If you found any of these events surprising, there are plenty more out there, tucked away in footnotes and forgotten reports. Thanks for watching.